as much of you as I can take. I'm so done, so over being afraid. I've gone through the motions, I've been back and forth. I know that you're thinking you've heard this before. I don't know how to say it, so I'm just gonna say it, yeah. Fear you don't own me, there ain't no room in this story. And I ain't got time for you telling me what I'm not, like you know me. Well, guess what? I know who I am, I know I'm strong, and I am free, got my own identity. So fear you will never be welcome here. Take a minute, let it settle in. You probably never saw it coming. Something's gotta give, so I give up you. Oh, there's no room for you here, yeah, I've had enough. The no vacancy sign on my heart is lit up. In case you didn't hear it, here it is again. Oh, fear you don't own me, there ain't no room in this story. And I ain't got time for you telling me what I'm not, like you know me. Well, guess what? I know who I am, I know I'm strong, and I am free.
Host of Tea Time with Carol, and I want to welcome you once again into the tea room where we're sipping and pouring and enjoying an hour together. I'm so glad you've decided to join us today, and I think this is going to be a really, really awesome show. We have a wonderful guest for you today, and but before we bring her in, just want to chat with you for a second. We haven't talked in a while, and it seems like it's been a long time. It's been a long week, for me anyway, maybe not so much for you, but a busy week, but a very, very long one. I was very, very glad when, Friday finally came. And so today, I don't know if you've had a particular struggle that you're going through right now, but maybe in the not-too-recent past you can identify with what we're going to be talking about today, and that is making the transit from going from transition to transformation. And when we say transition, we're talking about, the occurrences that in your life that you hadn't planned. You're going along and everything is going well, and then you get some really bad news from your doctor, or the government shuts down for 35 days. Or, there's something else that comes up in your life that you did not anticipate, you did not plan for, and it just really sets you back, So we're going to be talking today about how you move through that into another, like a butterfly. You come out, you emerge like a beautiful butterfly. But how you get there, because transition is not cute, and it's you to my guest. This is Michelle Smith, who is the head of human capital for a corporation in the, I believe, Richmond area. It's TI Verbatim Consulting, where she does a lot of different things there. She's an executive in that company, but she has a really, really, really interesting story that I think will challenge you and encourage you and inspire you. So without further ado, please help me welcome my guest, Michelle Smith. Michelle, come on in.
Hello, Carol. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful today, and I want to thank you so much for having me on the show today. This is a great topic that we are going to be discussing today, and I do want to, right out of the starting gate, give a shout out to my CEO of TI Verbatim Consulting, Ms. Jean Payne. Jean was instrumental in you and I meeting each other or getting to talk to each other, and definitely want to do that. TI Verbatim has headquarters in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and I serve in the branch office, which is in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So we certainly appreciate this opportunity to be here. I do want to, by way of just, again, plugging TI Verbatim, say that we do workplace culture assessments and language services, and we do a variety of business support services for government and commercial businesses. So I do want to put that out there. But I'm so happy to be here today to talk about transition and going from a transition into transformation. And we were talking about what do you do when you hit bottom, when you get information that you weren't expecting, and how you work through that.
Yes, exactly. Well, let me just start by sharing. I've got a couple of 3 stories that I can think of off the top of my head. But one that I don't necessarily share all the time, but I don't mind. I've gotten to be, I guess, just transparent in my old age, where there was a time where I was so wrapped up in my ego and so wrapped up in my identity as an attorney that I really did not have an existence outside of that. That was, and I thought I was okay. I thought that was perfectly okay, and I didn't realize how broken I really was. And so I had a hard time. I think of it now in terms of having a voice, and I had no voice, even though I could go in the courtroom and, I lost very few cases. I was very persuasive as a litigator, but when it came to being able to articulate my own concerns and my own interests and all that, I just could not do it. So I was married at the time, and my ex managed the business, and he managed quite a bit of it into his own pocket. And that, it ended up coming back on me because I was the one with the license, And so I ended up, it was really devastating when I ended up, losing my license, losing my home, losing basically everything that I had. And this is from someone who made close to $1 million her first year out in private practice, So, coming back from that, it took much prayer, and it took several years. There were people who told me I would never own a house again. And I'm sitting in my house right now, thinking that I would never be able to come back, from those losses. And I got a letter in the mail today from my car dealership that said, hey, we want to give you a new 2019, car. Come on in and talk to us. And we think we'll be able to lower your car payment, So there is life, after a tragedy. But I think looking back, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because it forced me to get out of my own way. And it forced me to find God in this, because I had been saying for a long time I wanted a relationship with God and just didn't know how. And so I was sort of, if you can imagine sort of a ball kind of bouncing off the walls, that's kind of where I was, trying this and trying that and not really being able to get too far with anything, because I always came back to the brokenness in me being kind of the primary thing, and how to get past that. So part of my message today is learning how to recognize when you're broken before you get hit up.
That's important.
You know, and I think some of us are so wounded that we don't realize that we're really the walking wounded. You know, we don't realize how bad, how deep the hurts are. And so in order to heal, you got to recognize, you know, you got to be able to say, this is what's so. You know, I'm hurt because this happened to me, or this person disappointed me, or this person hurt me, or whatever happened. You know, early on, you've got to be able to accept it, you know, and acknowledge it, you know.
Absolutely.
So that, you know, that was my big, you know, aha moment, that I could be accepted and acknowledged and loved without the law practice and without, I mean, I still have the law degree and everything, but I, you know, I am valuable as I am, just the me, not the me with the degrees, not me with the initials after my name, just me for me. And that was a big thing that I hope someone can hear today and recognize, you know, that you don't have to work to be loved. You know, and you don't have to buy love. I see a lot of women making that mistake too, you know.
And in fact, if you have to work for it, it's not really love.
Exactly. But I don't know if everybody, you know, kind of sees that, because you get so caught up. It's like, well, if I don't do this, somebody else will do it. So, you know, I'll buy them a car. I've seen women buy all kinds of, you know, do all kinds of things, you know, because they really just want to be loved, you know.
Yes. So, you know what? I think most of us, that's what, you know, there are things that motivate, so many things that motivate all of us, and the need for love, acceptance, the need to achieve, the need to be recognized for achievements. A lot of those things are motivators to actions, you know, that we do. That is an amazing story, Carol, of something that you went through and got to the other side of it, and you see that there is life after the transition.
Right.
So much there to unpack and to look at. You know, when there, I always say, I had my own, you know, situation that I went through about 6 years ago, and found myself, you know, in a situation that was thrust upon me. And you were just talking about earlier about transition, and, you know, when people are in transition, it's different if you make a decision to make a transition. You know, if you say, okay, I'm going to do something different, I want to transition to something else. But when transition is thrust upon you, when you were not expecting that this to happen, and that transition is then thrust upon you, it has a different effect on you as a person, very definitely. And what I always say is, when transition is unexpected and thrust upon you in a, you know, something that you didn't want to have happen, then you're going to go through stages of grief. You're going to have to work through what has happened to you, and I'm sure you can attest to that you have to realize, first of all, what has happened, and understand that you're in a situation where you're in a transition, like you said a minute ago. You have to realize that this is what has occurred, this is a situation now, and figure out how to get where you really need to go, how to heal from it, how to figure out where you go from here. I had a 23-year career in financial services, in insurance and financial services, and definitely I resonate with what you were talking about your identity being attached sometimes to what you do. And you were talking about being a lawyer and having that be an integral part of your identity. And certainly, I was in financial services for many years, and what I did was a part of me. And through that career, rose up through the ranks, shattered some glass ceilings, became an executive, and as with many companies that have, a change in leadership, and many times a change in corporate culture, found myself without a job, unexpectedly, certainly unexpectedly. And when you lose a six-figure job, it's a very real transition when you find yourself out there in the job market for the first time in over 20 years, and then realizing that, okay, you're 20 something years older than when you got out of college and were trying to find a job, and you're trying to pay bills, and you're trying to keep your house, and you're trying to keep your daughter in school and all of that. And I'm so very grateful that I have a wonderful husband who is a provider, who was able to stand in the gap, when this happened. But certainly no household can lose six figures, very easily. Right. And so, we had a time of very real struggle. And the struggle was prolonged because all of a sudden in the marketplace, it was sort of a liability to have 2 degrees and 20 years of experience. People would say, oh, you're overqualified. We think you're going to leave. If we hire you, we think you're going to leave as soon as you find something better, job application after job application, never, ever having had any problem finding a job in the past. And I must have put in 80 applications and went on many interviews. And it was just, I felt really helpless in the situation. And as time went on, I had to actually start my own business. I had to work very hard to turn this unexpected transition into a transformation, and I wound up actually becoming a real estate agent. Real estate was something that I was interested in when I was a teenager, and had thought about when I was in my first couple of years of college. I remember being 19 years old thinking about real estate, but I was in school for operations management. So you can imagine, my parents were kind of like, you're not matriculating at a university to become a real estate agent. So, so I went ahead and got my degree and, started my career and had a really great one, really fabulous career. But when I found myself suddenly and unexpectedly out of a job and, thought that I could easily just go on to another one, because I, had an MBA in HR. I was an operations executive. Surely, I had multiple skills. Surely I could find another job quickly. And was just extremely disappointed, frustrated, and confounded. When I had that issue, there were a lot of people out of work, maybe 6 years ago. The economy and things that people were going through, there were a lot of people looking for jobs. You would apply for a job and then go in and check on it and see 200 people applied for that job. So things of that nature just was very difficult. And I had a very strong relationship with God already. And at that time, when you have a relationship with God and something like this comes into your life, you do wonder and say, well, why is this happening? Okay, why is this happening? What, have I done something wrong? Is there something what did I do to get to this point? And I'll tell you, Carol, what I realized as I went through this transition, and then as I came to a point of transformation, that that God took me through that for a reason. He took me through that so that I could learn how to even more deeply trust in him. When you make a whole lot of money and you're living in a beautiful house and you're, really just doing wonderful things and enjoying your life, sometimes you can begin to think that you're the one that's causing these things to happen, or that you're the one that's doing all these things, but really it's God that's allowing blessings in your life. And it's always important to remember that there's a scripture that talks about knowing how to abound and to be abased, right? So you know how to abound, but you also have to know how, when things are scarce, when you do hit bottom, how you can trust in God to keep you going and to get you through it. And really, I would not be able to be here today talking to you, to help somebody else get through a transition if I hadn't gone through it myself. If I hadn't experienced it myself, then I wouldn't be able to stand here and say, yes, there is life after feeling as though you've hit bottom. There is a transformation awaiting you. And if you can work through the fact that this transition is here and figure out how to get to your transformation, and we'll be talking more about how you do that, then yes, there is life after that. There is better life after that. I can truly say that after having been a real estate agent for many years, the networking that I did is exactly what led me to the position I'm in now. And there have been some incredible things that I have been blessed to do in my job working at TI Verbatim Consulting. And it really has been a marvelous transformation in my life. And so I'm here to let folks know, yes, you can get through this.
Well, that is wonderful. And you said a whole mouthful or two in that. But I want to go back to something that you said a little bit earlier about the stages of grief that you go through when you experience this kind of situation. I don't even want to call it a problem. It's just a situation.
Right.
And, when you're sitting in there and you're going through these different stages, I think a lot of us, or I'll speak for myself, I went through periods of extreme anxiety. Do you have any tips for how you can, almost like panic attacks almost, where when you're thinking, oh my God, if I don't, I can certainly share, my experience in how I learned how to handle it. But, you get panicky when you know that your lights are going to be cut off on Tuesday if you pay the bill, and it's Sunday evening and you don't see anything coming through. So what do when you have that kind of experience and that level of anxiety, if that was your experience or in your work, how have you helped others deal with that internal struggle?
Yes. Well, you know what? It's a very real thing that when transition is suddenly thrust upon you, it's a lot like a death. And that there is a grieving process. You talked about the 5 stages of grief, and we know the 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, right? So, of course, you're going to go through the denial, state of shock, numbness. How could this happen? Why am I here? What in the world has happened? And then there's anger. There's anger that's very real, and you're going to feel that. And you have to allow yourself to feel that, being angry about the situation the fact that you're dealing with this circumstance and trying to figure out how you're going to put groceries on the table, how are you going to pay your bills, how are you going to keep your home, and anger is something that you have to allow yourself to feel it so it won't overwhelm you, so it won't take you over. And then you have to get through it. And, of course, we all go through that bargaining. Well, what if I do this, or what if I do that? If maybe it'll, maybe I can, undo this thing if I go do this, or if I do that. Sometimes people bargain with God. Well, Lord, if you turn this around and, turn this around, and I'll do this, I'll do that, and you just turn this thing around. But when it doesn't turn around, then sometimes you're moving into depression. So you have a profound sadness, but that sadness is necessary in terms of dealing with your healing, and that sadness is also normal. A lot of times there is a stigma attached to the anxiety and the depression. We live in this age where you're on social media and everybody's putting their best foot forward, and showing people the facade of saying like everything is always wonderful in my life, and especially in the faith community, you may feel like because you are a part of the faith community that, of course, you're never going through an issue. Everything is always wonderful, and so it is important, and I've talked with a lot of folks who've gone through this, and I've gone through it myself, the anxiety that comes specifically when you're dealing with a circumstance like, okay, I don't have enough food in the house to make lunch for my daughter, to make sure that she has, I can send her to school with lunch. What am I going to do? I don't have enough food in the house to make a nice dinner for my family. What am I going to do? And my advice to anyone who's dealing with circumstances like that, how am I going to pay my bills? Number one really is having a faith in God, and also a faith, a general optimism, and a general positivity, because positive thinking, some people view it as rose-colored glasses, as Pollyanna. You're sticking your head in the sand. You're not really looking at the reality of the situation. But positive thinking really is looking at the reality of the situation and figuring out, first of all, saying to yourself, this is not the end of the world. Let me creatively think about how I can work this out, what I can do. If I have to go to a food pantry at a nonprofit or at a church and get some food, then that's what I'm going to do. If I have to go to the Goodwill to buy clothes because I can't afford Nordstrom's right now, then that's what I'm going to do. Who can I contact who can perhaps give me a short-term loan? Can I get a short-term loan? And therefore, if you can't, are there any agencies out there that can help me? Working the problem, deciding to yourself, you know what? I am not going to let this situation, let the stress overcome me. I'm going to pray about it, give it to God, and I'm going to figure out, even if it's something that I never would have ever considered doing when I, had a lot of money, or when I, was in a better situation. And I'm going to hold my head up high and do what I need to do to get through this. It's been my experience that if you can get through and go through what you're going through, keeping a positive attitude, and also not letting it stop you from doing what you can do to help others, even in the midst of your lack, that your situation will turn around suddenly. It's just like, sometimes, just like the terrible thing happens suddenly. I have seen it where the help and the provision will come suddenly. You know, I've had the situation where, you know, like, for example, maybe not having enough food and wondering what I'm going to do, and then finding out that there's an event going on where they're serving food, you know, and so we're participating in this event, and oh wow, they fed us. Well, thank you, you know, thank God, because I didn't know how I was feeding my family that night. You know, those kinds of things do happen, but you do have to stay in a state of belief that it can happen and faith that it can happen. And you know, I know that we may have many types of people who are listening in today, and some people may have a relationship with God and some people may not. But if you can, and of course, I'm always going to advocate having a relationship with God. So I'm going to definitely advocate for that, because he won't leave you or forsake you, and he will bring you through these types of situations. But I also want to say, if you can keep a positive outlook and say to yourself, all right, I feel the anxiety, I'm upset, I'm going to take a deep breath, I'm going to drink a glass of water, and I'm going to work the problem and think about this. Now let me just say this. I'm also going to say something that, you know, I know has been something that people talk about in the faith community and outside the faith community, and there's been some stigmas associated with it, and that is, if you are having that kind of a real deep anxiety and depression, you need to talk to someone. You need to talk to someone who is skilled and educated to help people that are going through that kind of thing. Certainly, the first step I advocate is talking to God, because he knows more than anyone, and going to him in prayer. But also, there is nothing wrong with going and speaking to a counselor, talking to someone who can help you and give you coping mechanisms to deal with the stages of grief that you're going through. And we're talking about losing jobs, but there's also, you know, people have many other losses in their lives. You may have lost a loved one. You may have had some tragedy come in your life, other types of things that have come where you feel like I'm hitting rock bottom. And so whatever it is that you're going through, whatever the situation, seek the resources and the help to get you through that. Whether it's, you know, transition can take so many forms. There's a transition to having a child. There's a transition to getting divorced. There's a transition to leaving the military, to moving to a new city, retiring. Marriage is a transition. There's so many transitions in your life. Some of them are more tragic than others. Some of them are joyful, but they also are a transition. Like, for example, getting married or having a child. Whatever the transition, there's nothing wrong with talking to people who are skilled in that area, and they can give you what you need to know to combat that anxiety, combat that depression. Talk to your doctor. Tell your doctor how you're feeling. There's definitely positive things. There are positive things that can come out of talking to a professional, and I definitely advocate that. I will say, from my own personal experience with the anxiety or depression that comes from dealing with major transitions, you know, the loss of my job. I recently in 2017 I lost my father. That type of grief. I've had situations in my life where I've dealt with sickness. And, you know, dealt with situations that were not, you know, that my mom went through an illness when I was in my 20s that was very traumatic to us, and just so many different things that I've gone through, to the point where I wrote a book. I wrote a book about understanding the role of suffering. and rising above the pain. Back in 2005, I wrote that book, and I am convinced that you can gain the strength to deal with life's problems and go on to walk in victory. And Carol, when you were talking about what you went through when, the loss of, your marriage, the loss of your business, your license, all of those things, that made me think about suffering, that you went through a period of suffering. I went through a period of suffering after the loss of my job and trying to reinvent and figure out who I am as well. But there is a role that suffering plays in our lives. We don't like it. Nobody wants to suffer. Nobody. But there really is a role that suffering plays. And it shows us how strong we are. It shows us what we're made of. It gives us a story, a testimony, something we can share with others to help them get through their own suffering. And it truly makes us stronger. I believe that. I believe that it makes us stronger. You don't feel strong when you're sitting in your household looking at those bills and you've gotten a foreclosure notice that, if you don't do something and soon, you're going to have to get out of your house. You don't feel strong at that point. You don't feel strong when you're trying to figure out how are you going to get your next meal. But it's the working through that and also giving those anxieties to God. And when you realize that you might be going through a dark night, but if you can just get through the night, the morning is coming. And when the morning comes, you understand, wow, I made it. I made it through with the help of God. And I'm stronger than I even realized, that I ever realized I was.
Exactly. That is so true. And in addition to your very good suggestions of talking to someone and, of course, talking to God about it, one of the things that I found helpful, and it's hard to do when you're feeling very anxious, but quieting yourself, sitting down and, just stopping your mind from running off with the what ifs. What if I don't get the money? What if this happens? What if the lights get turned out? How am I going to do? It's like you're the mouse on a wheel, and you're the hamster on a wheel. You're just going round and round and round and round. And if you can quiet your mind, just get into a place where you just focus on your breathing, and if a thought comes in, you just look at it and say, oh, okay, that thought is there. But you don't have to do anything about it. You just let it go. You just watch it go on off, and then you just just focus on your breathing, just in and out, just very slowly, and you can calm yourself. And in that state, if you can sit there, and I know when you're feeling anxious, it's I'm not going to say it's difficult to do, but you have to make a concerted effort to do it when you're not feeling, that you're all, and,
Right.
not feeling like you want to meditate about anything except a solution, But if you can get to that state, then the answers frequently will come.
Yes.
As who to contact. And, for some folks, prayer does that. But it's really the same thing, It's really the same thing because prayer is really a conversation, And so if you quiet, just bring it on down, just calm yourself, you'll be surprised at what will come up for you, what solutions will come up for you.
That's so true.
The other thing that you said that I think is really, really significant was your discussion of suffering and how important that is, because the one thing your brain you are hardwired to do is to avoid suffering,
at all costs.
Yes. At whatever the cost is, okay, we want to avoid pain. And so we want to be careful in how we talk about things and how we language things, because if you frame things in terms of negatives, you're going to draw more of that to you.
Right. Absolutely.
You know? So it's very, and so I think that's why, you know, your sharing about staying positive during this time is so important. You know, because your brain is going to bring you what you say you want. The universe brings you what you say you want. And so if you're talking about, you know, if every other word out of your mouth is something negative and about, you know, this is so terrible and blah, 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 and you're talking about no money, then that's what the universe is going to bring to you, no money.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
And the word says you have what you say.
Yep. And life and death is in the power of the tongue. Absolutely.
Exactly. And so that's why the way you talk about it, the way you talk to your children, because you're planting in them as well. But when you're feeling anxious, it's even more important that you are very conscious of your words. And you know, it's fine to share things, you know. And, you know, I know this is what you meant when you said talk to somebody. I know you were not including your girlfriend.
No. Someone who is skilled and is professional and educated to help people in what you're going through. Yes, that is so true. You can't talk to everybody when you're going through this type of thing. Because the truth is there's some people, and it's sad to say, but it's the truth, that are happy you're going through a problem. They may have been jealous when you were on top and doing well. And they, you know, secretly they're glad you've come down to this point and yet you're dealing with this issue and problem. So, yes, it is very important to stay positive and really talk to those people who you know can help you, not just anybody and everybody, because not everybody's in your corner, and that's the sad fact.
And even the ones that you think are really there, you know, when you go through something, you find out who your friends are.
Absolutely.
And I know when I went through this, there were a lot of people that I thought were really my friends who all of a sudden they wouldn't return a phone call. They you know, I was no longer, you know, anybody to. I wasn't anybody. Period. You know? That's okay.
Yeah. It really shows you, doesn't it, who is truly your friend and who was just around you for what you could do for them.
Exactly. And that's why it was no big deal. It was fine, and it was a blessing, really. You know, it's a blessing to find out who's really for you and who's not. That's a blessing. So, you know, there are a lot of fair weather friends. You know, they're around as long as things are good, and you know, and then you have an opportunity to see, oh, were they around for the things that I was doing for them? You know, and, you know, that's fine. So sometimes you need to do a little culling, you know, a little separating. And that's fine. That's a good thing.
That's another positive about going through issues and situations and problems. You know, it sort of cleanses it cleanses your associations. You begin to really understand what's really important. Maybe you thought that job was all important to who you are, your identity. But then when you realize, no, you know what? I'm a worthy person in and of myself, and I have something to offer the world, and I don't have to be defined by this group that I was with for 10 years or this occupation that I was in for 20 years. It definitely helps you really understand what's truly important. And you know what I think it does too? It helps you realize in how you're dealing with other people who are going through situations, how you handle other people, to remember what you went through. Remember, you know, where you have been, where you are now, you know, and what you've gone through, so that you can be more sensitive to people. You know, I know that because I had 20-something years of uninterrupted employment, there are some things that I didn't understand about people who seem to be unemployed and can't seem to keep a job or can't seem to get a job, you know. And I think that it made me more sympathetic, sensitive to people, because I was always a person that would help people get jobs. I was always, throughout my career, I was mostly in the operations area, and it was important to me to, you know, help people, if they were trying to find a job. I was doing resume writing and, doing career coaching. And I always liked to mentor people even in my previous career. I was a mentor to people in business and I still am. But I still didn't have all of the, I think, empathy that I needed to have in understanding what people are going through when they are, trying to find a job. I might think, well, why don't you just need to revamp your resume. You just need to do this and you just need to do that. And not understanding that there are some times when people are doing everything that they can. And they do need a little more help to get there, to really get there. So I think it's important always to remember where you came from, because it's going to help you help somebody else.
Exactly. And that is so true. That is so true, because I was probably the most judgmental person in the world. How could you get in this kind of a situation? I was very, very judgmental. And after going through this, I look at people a lot differently. And one of the things that I'm learning, I'm not there yet, but people who are, I work for the government now, and, not everybody's a member of my fan club. And I've learned how to pray for people who are really oppositional to me, who are oppositional to what I stand for and to the work that I'm doing, and would just as soon that I just, leave and just never come back, And I'm learning how to look at them in the way God would.
Yes.
And to pray for them. And what happens when I do that, God starts showing me the broken places in their lives. And I don't particularly want to see, because if flesh had its way, I would just as soon, write them off and, well, you don't want to listen to what I have to say. You want to be oppositional. You want to take everything I have. Well, bye. Bye, Becky. I don't need to.
Yes. You know what? And what you just said is very powerful about seeing them how God sees them.
Yes.
I've had my own situations where, because I've certainly had folks that were not on my side, not in my fan club, and I've had situations where no matter what I said, no matter what I did, they were just not going to like me, and I had a big, as I was, in my younger days, I had a big issue with that. I was like, well, what's there not to like? I'm a decent person, but what we have to understand, and you speaking from a spiritual standpoint, is that we're not in a fight with flesh and blood. We're not in a fight with human beings. There are, principalities, powers, spiritual wickedness in high places. There are things that human being that is against you is going through in their life. They've had transitional things. They've hit rock bottom in their life before. They've dealt with loss and grief, and a lot of the things that the reason why certain people act the way they do or set themselves in opposition to you really sometimes has to do with things that they are working through, that they have gone through, and they don't know how to deal with their feelings, and so they project it on you, or they decide they're, to be in opposition against you because maybe they see that you are moving more freely in something that has stymied them, and that creates jealousy, or that creates concern. What they really may want is to be as free as you are, or to achieve what you're achieving. But because they have not, it can create, this issue of whether it be jealousy or envy, or somebody like you hurt them in the past. And so you remind them of that person. I mean, there could be any number of reasons why opposition comes. And it could be they have an agenda, and you are standing in the way of their agenda. And because you don't even realize that you didn't know they had an agenda for you to stand in the way of. I mean, there's many different things, but a lot of times it's not personal to you. It's how they view the world, what they've gone through, what they're working through, and it's important to try to see them through the lens that God sees them through. That he who died for their sins, he understands what they're grappling with. And if you can see them through God's eyes, you can have bowels of mercies and compassion and return good for evil. I'm a witness that you can overcome a whole lot of evil with good. If you continue to treat that person well, you continue to speak to them, you continue to help them. If you see that they have a problem and you can help them and you help them, that really dissolves a lot of opposition and a lot of jealousy and a lot of, if you can just continue to be loving toward them, or at the very least decent toward them, although they're not being decent toward you, time will bring it around where they will, in my opinion, as you give it long enough, it'll get reconciled and you guys can work through whatever it is and it'll fix itself. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah. But, I'm telling you, flesh does not want to do any of that stuff. Flesh wants
right.
to, cuss them out real good, park my reservation in heaven for 5 minutes, cuss them out, and then redeem my reservation again,
And as we know, we can't do that, but we do have definitely, the what do you call it, the temptation to do that.
Yeah.
But you're right, I didn't say it was going to be easy to do that. Right?
No,
it's not easy. It's not easy to have mercies and compassion and to remember that this person has their own issues that they're going through, and that's why they're doing this. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah. And that's where the compassion comes in, and that's so important. And these days when we see such a lack of that from the top, when
yes.
we see a lot of bullying and this huge lack of compassion and feelings toward our fellow human beings, this is a time when we're called to demonstrate it even more.
I agree.
Because it's not an easy time to do that, when people. I was listening to one of the networks, and their tagline has to do with it's sort of a bullying tagline, don't mess with America. And I was like, wow, is that really? I mean, it's just so many. There's not even an attempt at being neutral. Number one, and is that really the direction that we're going in now? Where this has been a refuge for people who were having difficulties, whether it was political or social or economic. This has been a place of refuge, and now what are we saying? What are we saying now?
Carol, it's so, and not just in America, but I think in society at large, all over the world, we are seeing a lack of compassion, a lack of love, a lack of civility, all of those things. And I think when you said that, "Don't Mess with America," the song, there's a song I've heard on television that has that phrase in it, "Don't mess with America." And I think that it is a sign of the times and the society that we are in. I fully agree with you that it's incumbent on individuals, human beings, especially those with faith, to demonstrate that you don't have to be that way. You can have compassion and you can be civil. There's so much within our current society that is the antithesis of what you need in order to be calm, to be without anxiety, to be compassionate. And so it is something that we have to do. We're too busy. There's too much going on with the whole social media thing, everything looking like it's wonderful when it's really not, when we need to have honest conversations about about what's really not going right and to get help with that. People, the whole bullying situation, the coarseness of society, the lack of civility, it's seen even on television. It's to the point now where you can hardly watch TV without seeing something, terrible language or something, horrible going on. It's hard to watch the news anymore. You look at the news every day. Somebody's being killed. Somebody's being assaulted. There's and of course the political discourse has reached an all-time just level of confusion and lies and ridiculousness. So, and then in the midst of all that, you have people, normal people, just trying to make a living, just trying to live their lives, trying to enjoy their families, trying to raise their children, all that kind of thing. And so that's why this conversation today is so important to helping people deal with hitting rock bottom. Because if you look around you, you don't see much that gives you hope. But I am a proponent of faith in God gives you hope. And that as much as possible, if people can grab hold to faith, grab hold to God, and realize that what you see around you isn't always, that's not how it has to be. And that's not how you have to be. You don't have to be overcome with anxiety, depression, and grief. You can get through your current situation. And if we all demonstrate a little compassion and love, maybe we can change the society, or at least the social circles that we are in, for the better.
Absolutely. And, that is such a profound word, Michelle, and that is really my why for why I do this, in this little corner of the world. I'm hoping to change somebody's life and give somebody a hope for tomorrow. That you may be down right now. Things may be a little bit difficult today, but tomorrow is a new day. And I always encourage folks. I'm in a Facebook group right now where we're doing every day. We're posting 3 things that we're grateful for. 3 things. And our commitment initially was to do it for 21 days, but I think we're continuing because everybody is enjoying it so much. And the thing about gratitude is the more you focus on it, the more you find things to be grateful for. When you really start focusing on all the blessings, then, what you want becomes less and less because you start recognizing so much of what you already have,
exactly.
what you've already been blessed with. And that becomes a much bigger deal to you. You can really focus on, wow, this is, and it can be little things. I'm not even talking about material things. I mean, one morning I was so grateful for the sun shining on my face as I was driving to work.
The little things, exactly.
So good, and looking at some beautiful flowers one day, fresh flowers. You find, gratitude in relationships and your family and just all kinds of things. But as we knew, this hour was going to run out very quickly.
Oh, yes, so quickly.
Yeah, and it did. But, I appreciate you so much because...
Thank you. You too.
Well, thanks. I think that was so good. And so helpful in moving us through the 5 stages of grief and giving some very positive, some very right now kinds of things that folks can do who find themselves in a transitional situation. And, just like with the butterfly, we know that, there is a transformation that comes at the end. And it's exactly what you said. When you come through it, you are not the same person.
Exactly.
I am not the same person that I was when I was practicing law. I don't even recognize that person anymore. I can talk about her, but she's completely different from who I am today.
And you're the improved person because of what you went through.
Absolutely. So that's the blessing, and that's something to be grateful for as well, knowing that when you get through this, there'll be some lessons. It's challenging right now, but there are some lessons that will serve you for the rest of your life, when you get through to the other side. So Michelle Smith of TI Verbatim Consulting, we want to thank you so much for coming today, and it has been so good. I want to encourage you to keep your calendar open. Maybe we can invite you back. We'll keep the lights on and the door open for you, and
yes, I would love that. Thank you, Carol.
Great. That would be wonderful. I really look forward to it, and thank you so much for agreeing to be so transparent and so open, in your testimony. So to our listeners, we thank you for joining us today. Remember, everything you want is on the other side of fear. We'll be back with you next week, same time, same station, 4 o'clock. We'll be back with another episode of Tea Time with Carol. And until then, you stay strong, be blessed, and we'll see you soon.